Hello and welcome to this screencast, this time in commercialisation and the golden triangle. Reminder about these presentations: so the yellow text boxes are tasks for students, the green text boxes are the note-taking sections for students, the blue text boxes are differentiation tasks, and the red text boxes are the teaching and learning strategies and ideas for the practitioner. So for this specific topic, the syllabus asks you to be able to define the keyword of commercialisation. So what is commercialisation? And explain the relationship between sport, sponsorship, and the media. Okay, and we're going to look at this concept, this idea of the golden triangle, and try to come up with relevant examples to apply the golden triangle. So first and foremost, let's look at this word commercialisation first and foremost. So when we think about commercialisation, this is very similar to sponsorship. It's this idea where we've got a process in which a new product or service is introduced into the general market. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're actually exploiting, okay, an activity or an organisation in a way in which we could get our product or our brand to be designed and to be made into a profit. So ultimately, the specification in terms of GCSE PE basically refers to commercialised activities as being things like sponsorship, and we're looking at the involvement of the media only. So your first task, boys and girls, is to look at this diagram on the right hand side of Formula One. Can you pause your video here? Can you just write down any brands, any logos that you can see being advertised in the picture? Okay, so hopefully you've got a few ideas down in regards to the different brands and logos that are advertised here. You can see Heineken in the background advertising maybe the racing track. You've got Rolex, which is also a big sponsor, it seems, for Formula One here in terms of trackside. And then on the car itself, there's loads of different sponsors. So you've got Tag, which is a watch company there at the front of the Formula One car. You've got Puma, which is kind of near towards the driver's helmet. And then you've got Aston Martin being the actual brand of the car make, and Red Bull, which is actually on the side of the car as well. So let's look at sport and how it's become a business. So ultimately, every aspect of sport now has become a commodity. What we mean by commodity is a product. So if we think of sport as a product, the sport itself is a product, but also everything within the sport. So if we think of players, they can be bought and sold. So in essence, they are products. Okay, we can also sell, for example, the competitions to different businesses. Okay, the media will look to advertise and project and coverage sport, and the sponsors, the businesses, will be in abundance, won't they, really, in regards to the ground itself. They will help sponsor the teams and the players. So all aspects in terms of sports, the grounds, the teams, the players can be advertised through businesses. And ultimately, in order for sport to become a business, we require spectators. We need people to be watching. We need there to be a demand, okay, for people to watch the sport. Okay, so by spectators, we're talking about people that can watch the sport, and they can be either live at the event or they could be watching and listening elsewhere. So again, pause your video here. Can you think of a sport? Okay, can you try and explain how has it changed? How has it evolved into a business? Can you provide some examples too? Okay, so hopefully you come up with a few examples there. Football is the main one really in regards to it becoming a business, but there are lots of others as well, okay, so that you could have mentioned. Cricket is a really good example in terms of how it's changed and the different types of competitions it's changed to. So we're going to look at this a little bit later. So if we think of the media, first and foremost, you can see there that there are the main types in terms of media include things like television, radio, newspapers. Okay, but there are other forms of media as well in terms of this day and age. So ultimately, sport can be watched by spectators, as we said before, live or at home, and ultimately the media attracts. The fact that we have media involvement, which is covering the different event or the sporting event, means that we have businesses, we have sponsors who want to promote their brand, their products, their merchandise. I've set a question there for you in terms of how has the media changed over the last 15 years? Pause the video here, see if you can answer that. Okay, so to the right of that question, when you paused it, you probably could see the answers. Hopefully that didn't put you off in terms of trying to come up with your own words as well. But ultimately, the media has changed over the last 15 years. We think of social media in particular, the different platforms that exist now. The internet is much more accessible, isn't it, in regards to different tablets that exist. And ultimately, we've also got access to the sporting performers' lives now, okay, through things like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So all of those things has increased the popularity of the individuals and also maybe the sports. We also have a bigger increase in the broadcasting rights. So in order for TV to actually show some of the footage of different sports, they've got to pay the different sports for that. Okay, so broadcasting rights have really increased in terms of the amount of money involved in sport nowadays. Okay, so let's look at the word in terms of sponsorship. So when we talk about sponsorship, this is where a company pays money to a team or individual in return for advertising their goods. Okay, so there's a clear relationship here between the sport and the business. Okay, and the business's involvement is it wants to advertise its own products, and it does this through sport. And ultimately, if a sport is popular, if a sport is high in demand, it's going to be shown on the media. And if it's shown on the media, that increases the exposure, that increases the coverage, the viewing of that specific product. So pause your video here. Can you think of any examples of sponsors in sport? Okay, so hopefully you come up with some different examples. If we think about football jersey, the football shirt, okay, you've got lots of different sponsors on the jersey itself, okay. The main sponsor, which will be in the middle, which might be Samsung, Etihad, you can see there, Fly Emirates in terms of Arsenal, Chevrolet for Manchester United, but also the sporting brand. If we think of Adidas, Nike, New Balance, and so on, all of those will also be the main sponsors for the actual specific kits. For individual sports such as tennis, again, pause if you go here, look at Roger Federer, look at all the different sponsors he's had in the past, okay, ridiculous amount, and in terms of the money, it's unbelievable as well. So, think about the benefits of, if we're advertising our products, our brand, okay, what are the benefits to the performer and for the sponsor themselves? So for the performer, okay, ultimately, the performer can receive things like free clothing, okay, or at a cheaper rate. Okay, if Usain Bolt, for example, if he's sponsored by Puma, he's going to get some of that free clothing. He's going to get some of that clothing at a cheaper rate. He might also receive free equipment. It might be footwear, for example, for his races, and so on. And he might also be able to therefore concentrate on the sports, on the training itself, okay, because he's got no financial worries, because the sponsor is giving him money to wear their products. For the sponsor themselves, okay, if they're sponsoring an individual or a team, then ultimately they're going to hopefully increase their revenue by increased sales. Okay, so ultimately, if they're part of a sporting team or brand, if they're part of a sporting individual who's successful, then ultimately more people are going to buy those kits because they are successful. It increases the profile, okay, in terms of association with that successful performance. Okay, we think of New Balance now. If we're a Liverpool fan, then we'd probably look at New Balance as a good brand, for example, that we want to buy products from. Advertising is kind of free advertising in a way for the business. It's also cheaper than TV advertising, and that comes through tax benefits. Okay, so the sponsor doesn't get taxed as much because they're not advertising through TV. They're just doing it through sponsorship. And then finally, it can create a good relationship in regards to the local community as well. So let's think about the golden triangle itself, okay, as a concept. So first of all, we need to know about the 3 points of it. So the media, as we talked about, involves television, radio, newspaper, but also things like social media. The sport itself is watched by spectators all over the country and even the world if it's global. And also sponsors, as we talked about, okay, being the aspect of having free advertisement, okay, in return for giving money to that company. So if we think of the golden triangle itself, okay, we've got the sport and the spectators at the top, okay, and ultimately, if it's popular enough, if it's a high standard sport, the media is going to coverage it, okay, so the media gets involved. If the media are involved, then ultimately businesses and sponsors are going to be interested because they want to promote their brand, they want to promote their products. And if there's a bigger exposure in terms of the media showing the sport, then ultimately they can get their products out there. The business and sponsors themselves will give money to the sport, okay, so that they can put their sponsor on, for example, their shirts, but also maybe name the stadium that way and so on. But the business and the sponsors, they rely on the sporting spectators to actually buy some of those goods, some of those products. In the same way, the media also relies on the spectators because ultimately, in order for media to work, so for things like Sky Sports and BT and so on, they rely on subscription. Okay, so they need the spectators to be able to actually buy into that subscription. So pause your video here. Can you think of a sporting example by using the golden triangle? See if you can look at the sport, the media, and the different sponsors and businesses involved. And the next question, think about what are the benefits and the negatives to the triangle. So the sport might be football. We might be looking at, for example, Sky Sports or BT Sport, for example, and then the main sponsor could be, for example, if we're looking at sport and in particular a specific club like Manchester City, then the main sponsor, one of the main sponsors might be the Etihad, okay, an airline, for example. Okay, so we've got that clear link there between the three. So let's look at the benefits and negatives of the golden triangle. So ultimately, when we think of the benefits of the triangle, we think about the fact that we're going to be covering, more of the sport, okay, through, for example, like TV, social media, the internet, and so on. And that raises the awareness of the sport, so it should make it more popular overall. It increases the revenue, okay, for the sport. So ultimately, if we increase the revenue, if we have more money coming in from businesses, from media, then we can actually provide better facilities. We can increase the standard of our sport, okay, because the clubs can now afford to buy better players, for example. And if they buy better players and there's a better standard, then ultimately that's going to make, again, the sport even more popular and increase the coverage of it even further. What are some of the negatives, however, to the triangle itself? Well, if we have media now being quite a big influence in regards to sport, they can influence the timing of different matches. So they can have a big say on when they want to cover the different sporting events live. Media can also sensationalize different sporting events. Okay, so sometimes they can brand it and they can sensationalize it and it can overhyped and too much for some spectators. And also they can change the nature of the game. Okay, they can increase the amount of breaks. If you look at American football, for example, okay, heavily commercialized American football, and we have a break maybe every 30-40 seconds with an advert in between and so on. Okay, and that can break up the enjoyment of watching that specific sport. Only the sports that are popular will be televised. This has a real impact on sports that are maybe not as popular, okay, referred to as minor sports. So things like badminton, okay, might be an example which is not televised as much, okay, real kind of change then between the popular sports and the less so popular sports. And some of the performers themselves, they might have to spend too much time on sponsorship duties, okay, so this could be through advertisement, this could be through having to go to corporate events, okay, and it might impact on their training, might impact on their own private life. And also we have an increase to win due to the sponsor pressure. So the sponsors may pull out if, for example, we have a team or an individual who isn't performing well anymore. So we've got an added pressure now through the sponsor, not only from ourselves as a performer and from our manager and coach, but actually through the sponsors as well. Okay, in terms of educators for the teaching and learning strategies for this specific topic, you can look at things like kit and merchandise and design to get some of the students to maybe create their own stadiums, kits and so on, and which sponsors they might put for their specific teams and individuals, and try and think about why they pick those specific sponsors. What can they give the performer or the team in return? Look at some debating topics, so what are the positives and negatives of sponsors, what's the positives and negatives of sport becoming a business, and get them to do some research as well. Best of luck.